What if I told you 2026 will not change your life? Shocking. Listen carefully. The calendar will change. The year will change. But your life will only change if you change. Most people will enter 2026 with big dreams and leave it with the same excuses. But a few, just a few, will use discipline, not motivation, and quietly build a life they once thought was impossible. This is not a hype story. This is not magic. This is the real reason 2026 can become your year. And it starts with one small decision. Today. Today. Every year, on the last night of December, Ion stood near his window, watching fireworks light up the sky. New year, new hopes. Same life. He whispered to himself. Next year, everything will change. He said it in 2021. He repeated it in 2022. Again in 2023. And once more in 2024. Now, as 2025 was ending, he felt tired, not physically, but mentally. Same alarms snoozed every morning, same scrolling, same dreams written in notebooks. Never touched again. Ion wasn't lazy. He had dreams. Big ones, but his days were ruled by moods, not discipline. Some days he felt motivated, he worked hard, planned big, felt unstoppable. But most days, he waited to feel ready. And readiness never came. One evening, while cleaning his room, he found an old diary. Inside were goals from 5 years ago. Same goals. Different years. That night, something broke inside him. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just a silent realization. If I enter 2026 like this, I will be the same person in 2030. And that thought scared him more than failure. That night Ion didn't promise big changes. He didn't make a vision board. He didn't wait for motivation. He made one rule. A rule so simple, it felt useless. But that rule would quietly rewrite his entire life. The rule Ion made that night was not heroic. No 5 a.m. miracle routine. No 10-hour grind promise. No hustle till you drop mindset. Just one sentence, written on a small paper and taped to his wall. Every day, I will win once. That's it. Not a big win, not a life-changing win. Just one small, intentional win daily. The next morning, when the alarm rang, Ion's mind did what it always did. Sleep 5 more minutes. You deserve rest. Start tomorrow. But then his eyes landed on that paper. One win. He didn't jump out of bed. He didn't feel motivated. He simply sat up. Win number 1. That day, he didn't try to fix his life. He just finished one task he'd been avoiding for weeks. No celebration. No Instagram post. Just a quiet checkmark in his mind. That night, something strange happened. He felt calm. Not excited. Not proud. Just calm. Because for the first time in years, he kept a promise to himself. The next day, the win was even smaller. A 10-minute walk. No phone. No music. It felt boring. But boredom didn't matter. The win did. Days passed. Some days his win was waking up on time. Some days it was reading 2 pages. Some days it was saying no to distraction. Life didn't change overnight, but something inside Ion shifted. He stopped asking, do I feel like doing this? And started asking, what's today's win? And slowly, very slowly, discipline stopped feeling like punishment. It started feeling like control. By the second week, the excitement was gone. No inner fire, no dramatic music in his head. Just normal days and heavy resistance. One morning, Ion woke up tired, irritated, and blank. He stared at the wall and thought, what's the point? This isn't changing anything. That was the old pattern trying to return. Earlier, this feeling meant quitting. But now, he had a rule. One win. So he chose the smallest win possible. He made his bed. That was it. No workout. No planning session. No productivity streak. Just one simple action. And something unexpected happened. The day didn't collapse. In fact, after making his bed, he opened his laptop, not to work hard, but just to organize one folder. Another quiet win. Ion realized something important that day. Motivation makes you start. Discipline makes you show up when motivation disappears. Weeks passed. Some days were messy. Some wins felt useless. But unlike before, he wasn't quitting when life got hard. He wasn't waiting for the perfect mood. He was showing up imperfectly. And that consistency started doing something dangerous. It built self-trust. For the first time, Ion believed himself when he said, "I'll do it." Not because he felt strong, but because he had proof. Small proof. Daily proof. 2026 hadn't even started yet, but Ion was already becoming someone new. Not louder. Not faster. Just reliable. And that scared him because if this continued, there would be no excuse left. 3 weeks passed. Nothing dramatic happened. No praise. No sudden success. No one saying you've changed. In fact, people around Ion noticed. Nothing. His friends still joked the same way. His family still asked the same questions. The world treated him like the same old person, and that hurt more than failure. One evening, Ion sat alone and thought, am I fooling myself? Earlier, he used to quit when progress wasn't visible, when results didn't arrive fast enough, but this time was different. He wasn't working for applause, he was working for alignment. That night, he opened his diary and wrote, "I am not building results, I am building standards." The next day, the winds got uncomfortable. Waking up early, on cold mornings, choosing work over scrolling, saying no to plans that stole his focus. No one clapped, but something else happened. Ion stopped negotiating with himself. There was no inner debate anymore. When it was time to act, he acted. When it was time to rest, he rested. That mental noise, the endless should I or shouldn't I, it began to fade. And in that silence, he discovered a new kind of power. Not excitement, not pressure. Clarity. 2026 was getting closer, and for the first time, Ion wasn't hoping the year would save him. He was preparing to meet it as a different man. It happened on a random Tuesday. No warning. No big reason Ion woke up late. The alarm didn't ring, or maybe it did, he didn't remember. Panic hit. The morning routine was gone. The calm was gone. The one-win rule felt broken. Old Ion would have said, "Today is ruined. I'll start again tomorrow." That sentence had destroyed years of his life. He sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the floor. The chain was broken. Or so he thought. Then he remembered something important. The rule was never perfection. The rule was one win. So instead of quitting the day, he saved it. He skipped the workout, skipped the planning. But he did one thing. He showed up to his work fully focused. No phone, no excuses for just 30 minutes. That was the win. Not impressive, not Instagram-worthy, but real. That night, Ion realized something most people never understand. Discipline is not about never failing. It's about refusing to disappear after failure. From that day on, he stopped fearing bad days. Because bad days no longer erased him te-wera-hoost days. And slowly, his identity shifted. It was no longer trying to change. He was becoming someone who always returned. 2026 was now just weeks away. And for the first time in his life, Ion wasn't chasing a new year. He was carrying momentum into it. As 2026 came closer, Ion noticed something uncomfortable. The problem wasn't his effort anymore. It was his environment. His phone buzzed constantly. Friends laughed at his new seriousness. Late-night scrolling tried to pull him back. Nothing evil. Nothing dramatic. Just noise. One evening, after losing 2 hours to mindless videos, Ion felt angry. Not at the phone, but at himself. Then he asked a dangerous question. Why am I relying on willpower in a weak environment? That night, he didn't make big promises. He made small changes. He removed the most distracting apps, put his phone in another room while working, prepared his clothes and to-do list before sleeping. Tiny moves, quiet decisions. The next day felt easier, not because he was stronger, but because temptation was weaker. And that's when Ion understood discipline isn't about fighting yourself all day. It's about designing a life where the right choice is easier. His daily win became faster, cleaner, less painful. He wasn't forcing discipline anymore. He was supporting it, and something unexpected happened. People started noticing, not his habits, but his calm, his focus, his ability to say, I'll get back to you, and actually do it. 2026 was about to begin, and Ion wasn't hoping to survive it. He was quietly setting the rules. The first sign didn't come as success. It came as respect. One morning, a colleague said casually, "You're very consistent these days." Not praise, not applause, just an observation. But it stayed with Ion all day, because no one had ever described him that way before. His work started finishing earlier. His mind felt less cluttered. Decisions took less energy, not because life became easier, but because he stopped wasting energy fighting himself. Then came a small win that mattered. A task he had postponed for months was completed in a single focused session. No drama, no stress. Just done. That night, Ion smiled, quietly, not because he was proud, but because he recognized himself. For the first time, his actions matched the person he wanted to be, and that alignment felt powerful. But with progress came danger. Comfort. He started thinking, maybe I've fixed it now. And that thought, more than failure, was the real enemy. Because discipline isn't tested when things go wrong. It's tested when things go right, and 2026 had just begun. January was smooth. Too smooth. Ion was consistent. Daily wins were happening almost automatically. Life felt manageable. And that's when danger appeared. Not as failure, not as chaos, but as comfort. One morning, he thought, I've earned a break. One break became two. Two became routine. Nothing collapsed, and that was the problem. Discipline didn't disappear. It softened. The wins got easier. The standards got quieter. And Ion didn't notice until one evening. He skipped his win entirely. No reason. No excuse. Just skipped. That night, he felt a familiar feeling. Guilt. Not loud, not heavy, but enough to wake him up. He opened his diary and read his old line. I am not building results. I am building standards. He realized something critical. Comfort is a reward, but living in it is a decision. The next day, he raised the bar slightly, not dramatically. He kept the rule of one win, but made it non-negotiable again, even on good days. Especially on good days, because discipline that survives comfort becomes character. 2026 was moving fast, and now Ion understood. Staying consistent is harder than starting. Something subtle happened in February. Ion stopped saying, I'm trying to be disciplined. He simply was. The rule of one win no longer felt like effort. It felt like who he was. When people asked how he stayed consistent, he didn't have a motivational answer. He just said, I don't negotiate with myself anymore. And he meant it. Earlier, every task came with an inner debate. Now, decisions were quicker. Not easier, quicker. Because his identity had shifted. He no longer asked, what do I feel like doing? He asked, what does someone like me do next? That question changed everything. Even on tired days, he showed up. Not perfectly, but reliably. And reliability builds momentum. But life never lets growth go untested. One afternoon, Ion received a message that could undo months of progress. An old opportunity. An old comfort. An old version of himself calling back. And for the first time in weeks, he hesitated. Because discipline is strong, but the past is familiar. The message was simple. Hey, long time. Want to come back? Sama. Setup. Easy money. Ion stared at the screen longer than he wanted to admit. He remembered the comfort, the familiarity, the shortcuts. That life didn't demand discipline. It didn't demand growth. Just showing up. Halfway. For a moment, his mind tried to justify it. I've earned this. It's temporary. I can manage both. The same excuses that once kept him stuck. That night, he didn't sleep easily. He imagined two versions of himself, one that chose ease, one that chose alignment. Both looked peaceful in the beginning. Only one stayed proud in the end. In the morning, Ion didn't overthink. He replied with one sentence. Thank you, but I'm building something else now. No explanation, no apology, just clarity. And with that message, a door closed. Not angrily, not dramatically, but forever. I felt lighter and strangely scared, because saying no to the past meant saying yes to responsibility. And responsibility changes everything. 2026 was no longer a hope. It was becoming a test. After saying no to the past, something unexpected happened. Life got heavier, not harder in action, but heavier in responsibility. People started expecting more from Ion. You're good at this. Handle it. You're consistent. You won't mess up. You can manage. Earlier, no one relied on him. Now, they did, and that scared him. Because failure now had consequences. Some nights, he felt the urge to disappear. To slow down, to be invisible again. But discipline had already changed him. He didn't run. He adjusted. He planned his days more carefully. Protected his energy. Respected rest without abusing it. And slowly, he learned a hard truth. Growth doesn't feel like success. It feels like weight you learn to carry. There were days he wanted motivation back. Something loud. Something emotional. But motivation never came. Discipline stayed. Quiet. Reliable. Unimpressed by fear. And that was enough. 2026 was moving forward, and Ion was no longer chasing progress. He was responsible for it. It didn't shout. It whispered. Late at night, when the work was done and the world was quiet, Ion heard it. Is this really you? What if this is temporary? What if you fall back? Earlier, doubt used to stop him before he started. Now, it followed him after progress. And that made it more dangerous. One night, exhausted and overthinking, Ion opened his old diary again. The pages from years ago felt foreign. Promises without action. Plans without follow-through. Then he looked at the recent pages. Short entries. Simple wins. Consistent days. No hype. Just evidence. That's when he understood something powerful. Confidence is not loud belief. It's quiet proof. He didn't argue with doubt. He didn't fight it. He just kept showing up. The next day. And the next. Because doubt loses power when discipline keeps moving. 2026 wasn't perfect. But it was honest. And honesty builds strength no motivation ever could. It happened when Ion least expected it. One decision, one delay. One external mistake. Not even his. And months of effort felt threatened. A project stalled. Trust wavered. Questions were raised. Earlier, this would have crushed him. He would have panicked. Blamed fate. Blamed others. Then slowly quit bet this time. He didn't react. He paused. He reviewed what he could control and ignored what he couldn't. No drama. No emotional speeches. Just calm action. He fixed what was fixable. Communicated clearly and accepted consequences without excuses. The pressure was intense. Sleep was lighter. Days felt longer. But discipline didn't crack. It adapted, and something rare happened. People noticed his response, not the problem. They saw stability under stress, and stability builds trust faster than talent. 2026 was no longer just shaping Ion. It was revealing him. After the setback, things didn't return to normal. They slowed down. Not failure. Not success. Just waiting. Emails took longer. Decisions were delayed. Silence replaced urgency, and silence is dangerous. Because in silence, your mind starts creating stories. What if this was the peak? What if I pushed too hard? What if this version of me doesn't last? Ion felt the weight again. But this time, it was different. He wasn't afraid of losing progress. He was afraid of losing direction. So he went back to the beginning. Not the habits. Not the routine. The rule. One win. Even when life paused, he didn't. Some days the win was patience. Some days it was restraint. Some days it was doing nothing, on purpose. He learned something few people do. Progress isn't always movement. Sometimes it's control. 2026 was far from over. The Yaradnti revealed its verdict. And Ion hadn't revealed his final form. He kept showing up. Quietly. Consistently. As if the story was still being written. Something strange happened after the pause. Life didn't speed up again. It stabilized. No chaos. No excitement. No dramatic wins. Just normal days. Earlier, Ion would have felt bored, would have chased something new. But now, he noticed something important. Normal felt powerful. He woke up without resistance, worked without overthinking, rested without guilt. Discipline was no longer an effort. It was the background of his life. And that's when he realized. Transformation isn't loud. It's when growth becomes invisible. People around him assumed he was naturally disciplined. They didn't see the small daily choices. The quiet wins, the rules he never broke. But Ion knew. And that was enough. 2026 continued. Not as a miracle year, but as a solid year. And solidity builds futures. Yet somewhere deep inside, he knew the biggest test hadn't arrived yet. The opportunity looked perfect. More visibility, more money, more recognition. Everything Ion once wanted, but it came with a hidden cost. Longer hours. Less control. Old habits trying to sneak back in. People around him were excited. This is your next level. Don't overthink it. You can manage. Ego liked it. Discipline stayed quiet. That silence bothered him, because earlier, discipline always felt clear. Now, it felt cautious. Ion paused. He didn't reject the opportunity. He didn't accept it either. He tested it. For 2 weeks, he lived as if he had already said yes. Woke earlier, protected focus harder, tracked energy honestly. And the truth became clear. It could do it, but not sustain it, without losing himself. That realization hurt. Because growth sometimes means outgrowing good opportunities. He adjusted the terms. Less exposure, more control, clear boundaries. Some people walked away. Some respected him more. Ion felt something new. Authority. Not over others, over himself. 2026 wasn't making him bigger. It was making him clearer. With clarity came distance. Not intentionally, not emotionally, but naturally. Some conversations felt shallow. Some friendships felt outdated. Some rooms no longer felt like home. Ion didn't judge anyone. He just didn't fit everywhere anymore, and that was lonely. There were evenings where silence felt heavier than workload. Earlier, noise distracted him. Now, silence exposed him. But discipline had taught him something important. Loneliness is not emptiness. It's space. Space to think, space to refine, space to lead yourself before leading others. People started coming to him for advice, not because he talked a lot, but because he listened well. He didn't preach discipline, he demonstrated it. And leadership grew quietly. Not through authority, but through consistency. 2026 was shaping him into something rare. Someone dependable even when no one was watching. And yet, there was one final layer he hadn't faced. Not discipline, not habits. Meaning. One question kept returning. Not loudly, not urgently, but persistently. Why am I doing all this? Earlier, discipline was about fixing himself. About control, about becoming better than yesterday. But now that he had stability, the question changed. What is this discipline serving? One night, Ion realized something uncomfortable. He had built structure, but not direction, and structure without meaning eventually collapses. So he stepped back. Not to rest, but to reflect. He wrote down what mattered beyond productivity. Contribution. Freedom. Impact. Not numbers. Not applause. He adjusted his daily wins again. Some wins were no longer about output. They were about alignment. Helping without reward, saying no to empty growth. Choosing long-term over immediate praise. Discipline became a filter, not just for actions, but for purpose. 2026 was no longer about achievement. It was about direction, and direction changes everything. But purpose brings responsibility, and responsibility brings a new kind of fear. When Ion accepted that his actions mattered, fear returned. Not fear of failure, fear of impact, because impact means people get affected by your choices. Words carry weight. Decisions create ripples. Earlier, if he failed, only he paid the price. Now, others could too. That realization slowed him down. He double-checked decisions. Delayed responses. Questioned himself more than before. But discipline didn't disappear. It matured. He learned a new rule. Move carefully, but move. Perfection paralyzes. Avoidance hides. Responsibility demands presence. So he acted with humility, not confidence. He owned mistakes early, listened more than he spoke, chose honesty over image, and something surprising happened. People trusted him more. Not because he was right, but because he was real. 2026 was no longer shaping his habits. It was shaping his character. And character attracts challenges that habits never could. One such challenge was approaching. Bigger, riskier, irreversible. The offer wasn't dramatic. No deadline countdown, no pressure calls. Just a simple question. Are you in or not? Ion understood immediately. This wasn't an upgrade. This was a direction shift. Saying yes would lock a path. Saying no would close a door. Both had consequences. He didn't rush. He returned to his rule, not the habit. The principle. One win. Not progress. Not outcome. Alignment. He asked himself, will this decision support the person I am becoming, even on my worst days? The answer wasn't loud, but it was clear. He chose the heart of clarity over comfortable ambiguity. He gave his response. And the moment he did, something changed. Not outside. Inside. There was no excitement. No relief. Just commitment. And commitment is heavy. Because once you commit, there's no hiding. 2026 crossed a line that day. There was no going back to potential, only execution. The moment commitment turned into execution, the romance disappeared. No more planning, no more imagining, only doing. Deadlines arrived faster than expected. Expectations rose quietly. Mistakes became visible. Earlier, people believed in his potential. Now, They measured his delivery, and delivery is unforgiving. Ion felt exposed, not because he was weak, but because he was visible. Every decision left a mark. Every delay had a cost. Some nights, he questioned everything. Am I ready for this? Did I choose too soon? But discipline didn't answer those questions. Action did. He broke work into simple wins again. One clear task. One honest conversation. One finished responsibility. No shortcuts. Slow, clean execution. And gradually, the noise faded. Not because pressure reduced, but because competence increased. 2026 was no longer a story about becoming. It was about performing as who he had become. And the margin for error was shrinking. The mistake wasn't small. And it wasn't private. It happened in front of people who trusted him. A decision made too fast. An assumption left unchecked. And suddenly, the room felt quiet. Not angry. Not dramatic. Just disappointed. Ion felt it immediately. That familiar urge returned to explain. To justify. To protect his image. Old instincts knocking again, but discipline had changed his reflex. He didn't defend himself. He owned it. Clearly. Calmly. Without excuses. I missed this. I'll fix it. No story. No blame. Just responsibility. That night was heavy. Sleep didn't come easily. Not because of fear, but because of awareness. He realized something painful. Growth doesn't protect you from failure. It only teaches you how to stand inside it. The next morning, he showed up early. Not to impress, but to repair. One conversation at a time. One correction at a time. One honest action at a time. Slow recovery. Quiet rebuilding. And something rare happened. Trust didn't disappear. It deepened. Because people don't trust perfection. They trust ownership. 2026 didn't break him that day. It tested whether he would disappear. Didn't it? After the failure, nothing magical happened. No applause. No instant redemption. Just work. Steady, uncelebrated Ion realized something most people never do. The real test isn't bouncing back once. It's staying consistent after the attention fades. He didn't rush to prove himself again. He didn't over-estabilized fixed systems. Improved processes, reduced unnecessary risk. Progress became boring, and boring was good, because boring meant sustainable. He stopped thinking in weeks, stopped thinking in months. He started thinking in years. What could survive pressure? What could survive boredom? What could survive success? Daily wins remained, not as motivation, but as maintenance. 2026 wasn't asking him to be extraordinary. It was asking him to be durable, and durability is built. When no one is watching, something big was forming. Not visibly, but structurally. The recognition came quietly. A mention in a meeting, a recommendation passed his way, a door opened without him knocking. Nothing flashy, but enough to shift how people saw him. Earlier, he wanted to be noticed. Now, being noticed felt risky, because recognition invites ego, and ego breaks systems. Ion stayed careful. He accepted credit, but redirected attention to the process. He spoke less, listened more, protected his routine like a boundary, because he knew something now. Success doesn't destroy discipline. Attention does. The wins stayed small. The days stayed structured. And that's why the recognition lasted. Not because he chased it, but because he didn't change under it. 2026 continued its quiet test. And Ion was passing, not loudly, but correctly. Yet one thing remained. Closure. Not an ending, but understanding. One evening, Ion did something he hadn't done in months. He looked back. Not to judge, not to compare, just to understand. The person who entered 2026 felt distant now, not because he was better, but because he was different. The biggest change wasn't productivity or discipline. It was self-respect. He no longer broke promises to himself. He no longer waited to feel ready. He acted, then adjusted, and that changed how he walked into rooms. How he spoke, how he decided. There was no dramatic transformation moment, just accumulation. Hundreds of quiet wins stacked on top of each other. 2026 wasn't a miracle year. It was a compound year, and compounding doesn't announce itself. It reveals itself later. Ion closed his diary that night with one thought. This is still in progress, because growth doesn't end. It evolves. It started unintentionally. Someone asked him, "How do you stay consistent?" Then another. Then a small group. Ion didn't prepare speeches, didn't create rules. He shared experiences. What worked, what failed, what stayed. He never sold discipline as motivation. He described it as respect for the future. People listened, not because he was perfect, but because he was honest, and that created responsibility. Because once people watch you, your standards can't drop silently. Ion felt that weight. He didn't resent it. He refined himself, not to impress others, but to remain aligned. 2026 was now bigger than his personal growth. It was influencing trajectories, and influence demands integrity. One last challenge remained, not external, internal. But what continues when he's not present? So he adjusted again. Not his workload, his intention. He stopped optimizing for ease and started optimizing for meaningful difficulty. Discipline returned to its sharp form. Not aggressive, intentional. 2026 was almost complete, but the story wasn't ready to settle. Ion stopped asking, "What do I want next?" He started asking, "What should exist?" Because I existed. The question changed how he worked. He documented systems, simplified processes, made things less dependent on him. Not because he wanted to leave, but because he wanted things to last. Discipline evolved again. It was no longer about daily wins alone. It was about designing continuity, helping others rise without controlling them, building structures that could survive his absence. This kind of work was slower, less rewarding in the short term. But it felt right. 2026 was now carrying something forward, not momentum, meaning. And meaning doesn't rush. One final internal shift remained. Not a climax, a realization. Ion finally understood something he couldn't have understood earlier. Discipline didn't change his life by adding more. It changed his life by removing noise. No chasing motivation, no proving anything, no running from discomfort, just clarity. He realized he was no longer asking, "Am I doing enough?" It was asking, "Is this necessary?" And that question saved time, energy, and focus. The pressure to become someone was gone. He already was, not finished, not perfect, but grounded. 2026 didn't give him confidence. It gave him trust and process. And process doesn't need applause. It only needs continuation. The year was nearing its end. People around him talked about next year goals. Ion listened. Quietly. Because he knew something they didn't yet. This wasn't about years anymore. It was about standards that don't reset on January 1st. Something was about to conclude. Not loudly, but permanently. If you're waiting for the perfect year, stop. Build discipline. Stack daily wins, and any year can become your turning point. Not loudly, not instantly, but permanently.